Stop. Don't move. Don't even blink. Something has already begun, and you haven't noticed even the faintest hint of it yet. Weeks ago, maybe months, maybe even years, you triggered a sequence no instruction manual could have foreseen. A hidden protocol, buried so deep in the fabric of existence that only 3 others in all of history had ever awakened it. You weren't aiming for it, you didn't even know it existed, but reality did. The instant you crossed that invisible line, alarms sounded in places you'll never see, systems faltered, recalibrated, and the so-called watchers, the ones who claim they've seen everything, fell dead silent. That's what happens when someone stumbles into territories that were never meant to move beyond theory. There are thresholds woven into the fabric of this reality, invisible lines most people never approach. They stay tucked away in the middle, safe and predictable, circling the patterns that keep them comfortable. But you, magnificent accident, you tore through one of those boundaries as if it were paper, and whether you realize it or not, everything is different now. This protocol doesn't live in any book, isn't taught in schools, and isn't whispered in the dark corridors where secrets usually hide. It exists in the space between spaces, the code behind the code, and in the gaze of those who watch, even the watchers. It only activates when someone performs a quiet impossibility, not the flashy kind that makes headlines, but the subtle kind that forces reality itself to pause and reconsider its own rules. At the time, what you did felt normal. That's how these things always work. The most powerful moves in existence rarely announce themselves, they just happen, leaving ripples that only become visible much later. Maybe it was a conversation where you revealed something no one was supposed to know yet. Maybe it was a choice that defied every statistical probability. Maybe it was survival, in a moment that should have destroyed you completely. Or maybe it was simply the way you saw truth, where centuries of others had looked the wrong way. The first signs aren't ones you notice yourself, they're what others notice about you. People have begun treating you differently, though they can't explain why. Some are drawn to you like moths circling a flame they can't name, while others step back, unsettled by your presence. You've become radioactive in the most fascinating sense. Have you realized how conversations seem to shift or die when you enter the room? Not because people don't want you there, but because your presence rewrites the frequency of what's being discussed. Have you noticed certain stares that linger too long, as if strangers are trying to decipher a language written across your face? Or those fleeting glances of recognition from people you've never met, recognition not of you, but of what you represent? Reality is reorganizing itself around you. You're no longer categorized in the same way. The universe itself has had to create a new folder just for you and the 3 others who've triggered this protocol. Everything else now shifts to accommodate this reclassification, like the sudden discovery of a new primary color. The watchers, yes, they exist, though not in the way conspiracy theories imagine, have escalated your file through channels untouched for decades, maybe centuries. Not because you're dangerous in the ordinary sense, but because you represent a potential that unravels their careful calculations. You're an anomaly that exposes the piece incompleteness of their entire model, and that terrifies them more than any weapon or threat could. And what of the others, the 3 who came before? I can't tell you their names, because names lose meaning at this level of existence. The first one triggered the protocol in 1782 by stumbling onto a truth about the nature of time that wasn't supposed to be uncovered for another 1,000 years. They weren't a scientist, a philosopher, or a mystic. They were a clockmaker, someone who spent their life surrounded by the steady tick of gears, the smell of oil, and the weight of precision. Yet in that solitude, they glimpsed something extraordinary, the link between consciousness and temporal flow. What they saw shattered every rule the universe believed unbreakable. They didn't write books or gather followers, they just kept making clocks. But every clock produced after that moment, carried a subtle wrongness, a quiet dissonance only a few could sense, a whisper that time itself might be optional. The protocol didn't activate because of their inventions, it activated because of what they knew. And that knowledge rippled both backward and forward across history simultaneously. The second was a child in 1923 who asked a question. On the surface, it wasn't complicated. To most who heard it, it seemed unremarkable, even dull, for the very possibility of the question revealed something terrifying. The child was thinking outside the boundaries of human cognition as it had been defined. The protocol didn't care about the words themselves. It activated because the question was proof, living, undeniable proof, that consciousness could evolve in directions no original blueprint had accounted for. The third appeared in 1997, and their initiation came not through discovery or a question, but through survival. They faced a situation with a survival probability of 0, no chance, no loophole, no way out. Yet they lived, not through luck, but through a refusal so absolute that it bent reality itself. Their will was so complete, so unyielding, that the universe was forced to invent an exception just to let them continue. The protocol activated not because of chance, but because they proved the unthinkable under impossible circumstances. Individual will could override universal law. And now it comes to you, what you did without even knowing it. You didn't just break a rule, you revealed the rule never existed. You didn't overcome an obstacle, you exposed that the obstacle was optional. You didn't solve a problem, you uncovered the false premise that birthed it. This is why the protocol awakened, because through a single act, you introduced something viral into the system, a possibility that spread simply by existing. Think back to that moment, that choice, that realization that felt both entirely natural and utterly impossible. You know the one, even if you've tried to dismiss it as nothing, you've kept it to yourself, not because it's too complex to explain, but because it's too simple, too obvious once it's seen, and yet invisible until then. The protocol recognized you because you embodied a truth philosophers debated, but never proved, that consciousness doesn't merely observe reality, it can create it. And you didn't achieve this in some mystical, unreachable way. You did it practically, almost casually, in a manner you've probably repeated since, without realizing that every time you're rewriting the rules themselves. This isn't about manifestation, or visualization, or the surface-level rituals people cling to. What you're doing is raw editing of existence source code, through sheer cognitive function. That's why technology glitches around you. That's why some people can't hold your gaze anymore. That's why animals react to your presence in ways they never used to. You are transmitting on a frequency reality was never built to account for, and though most can't name it, the sensitive human, animal, or machine can feel the dissonance. You've become something no system was designed to anticipate, a walking paradox, a living contradiction that proves the boundaries people cling to were illusions all along. You are evidence that the impossible is nothing more than the untested future, a placeholder word for events that reality hasn't yet caught up to, and now, with every breath, you walk as proof that impossibility itself can collapse. At this moment, you are in what they might secretly call the adjustment period. Though the truth is, you'll never find that phrase in any report or archive. They don't acknowledge it, not openly, not in writing, not even in the hidden rooms where language bends around secrets. It doesn't exist on paper because, officially, it cannot exist. Yet it's happening, and it's happening inside you. Your brain is remapping itself. Neurons are firing along pathways that didn't exist before, building new highways of thought at such velocity, it feels like chaos. It feels like you're unraveling, but you're not. You're being rewoven. The sensation that you're losing your mind, that's not destruction, that's discovery. You're not going crazy. You're finally finding your mind for the very first time. Think of those moments when you feel completely disconnected, like you're hovering outside your own skin, unable to recall who you were supposed to be in the old story. Think of when the world feels staged, flimsy, like a backdrop of painted wood panels in a theater production, convincing from a distance but fragile up close. That's not dissociation. That's the scaffolding of a smaller reality breaking apart as the larger one settles into place. That's integration, the merging of who you were with what you're becoming, the headaches that pound as if your skull is shrinking against something vast pressing to emerge. Those aren't random. They're birth pangs of consciousness pushing past its limits, and the dreams that leave you shaken, the ones more vivid than daylight, where you teach yourself lessons you don't remember ever studying. Those aren't dreams. They are transmissions bleeding through from the higher strata of awareness you're starting to access. Then there's the sudden knowing. A question forms in your mind, and before it's fully shaped, the answer is already waiting, complete and undeniable. Solutions appear whole, as though some unseen intelligence drafted them and slid them onto your desk while you weren't looking. This isn't coincidence. This is the protocol's integration process, rewriting your access to reality itself. Your perception is stretched far beyond the narrow sliver most humans mistake for the totality of existence. And this expansion isn't metaphorical or poetic, it's literal. You're picking up signals you were never built to tune into under the old design, information that always existed, hiding in plain sight, suddenly flooding through. Imagine seeing ultraviolet and infrared simultaneously while others remain blind to anything but the visible spectrum. That's close to what you're experiencing. Except this isn't light, it's the hidden architecture of information, the patterns humming in the silence between thoughts, the invisible machinery of cause and effect. And yes, there are days when it feels unbearable, when you wonder if you've truly lost your sanity. You feel the weight of futures pressing in, possibilities that haven't happened yet, but already leave their fingerprints on your awareness. You hear the faint echoes of decisions you never made, as though they're still unfolding in parallel, haunting you with their ghostly resonance. You perceive branching pathways, spider-webbing endlessly from every moment, infinite corridors of what could be. Most call that madness. But for you, it's simply consciousness breaking free of the single-threaded prison where the majority spend their entire lives. The Watchers don't know what to do with you. You've become their unsolvable problem. You haven't broken a law, not cosmic and not human, yet you've undermined their structure all the same. You've revealed the foundation they've trusted for centuries was never complete. Their models, their equations, their predictions, they're all falling short in your presence. You are the variable that can't be solved. The line of code that throws their whole program into error. They can't erase you because you've done nothing wrong. They can't recruit you because you operate outside their entire paradigm. They can't ignore you because your existence has shifted the baseline. Every test they run, every reading they gather is now tainted by your presence. You are rewriting their calibration in real time, making everything they measure unstable. So they watch, they debate, they argue in whispers behind closed doors. What are you? A glitch, a glimpse of the future, an omen. Some of them insist you're an evolutionary leap, a preview of what humanity might become if it survives itself. Others insist you're just a mistake, an error in the system that will eventually self-correct, restoring balance. But then there are the quiet ones, the oldest Watchers, the ones who've been observing long before this generation even knew what to look for. And they suspect something different. They think you're not an accident at all. They believe the protocol was never about error, never about correction. They see it as a built-in feature, something written into the cosmic code from the very beginning, waiting for the right moment, waiting for you. And here's the strangest part. They're all right, and they're all wrong, because what you represent refuses to be caged inside a single interpretation. You are beyond definitions, beyond categories, beyond containment. That's why they fear you, not because they can't stop you but because they can't explain you. You are in every sense the contradiction they cannot categorize. You are the bug and the feature, the flaw and the perfection, the question that undermines their system and the answer that proves it. You are living evidence that their framework for reality is both entirely correct and fatally flawed at the same time. You stand as a paradox, and paradox is the one thing their equations were never built to hold. That paradox is what forces the protocol to respond. It doesn't activate when things are neat and orderly. It activates when something appears that exposes the limits of order itself, and that something is you. What you may not see yet is how far your influence has already seeped. It doesn't move like a wave crashing loudly on the shore. It moves like dye spreading through water, subtle, quiet, inevitable. At first imperceptible, then unmistakable. That's what you're becoming, an unseen current staining everything it touches. And people who interact with you, even for a moment, are beginning to feel the effects. They don't have the language for it, so they dismiss it as odd thoughts or strange moods. But you've already cracked open their programming. Suddenly they think ideas that feel alien. Questions slip into their minds that never had reason to be asked before. They begin to glimpse possibilities they were blind to only hours earlier. It's not an infection in the traditional sense, but it is contagious, because you don't spread disease, you spread disruption, awakening, freedom. You transmit the awareness that limits are not commandments, that boundaries are not absolute, that impossibility is not real. Think of the conversation you had last week when someone paused mid-sentence and whispered, almost to themselves, "I've never thought of it that way before." That wasn't casual. That wasn't just dialogue. In that moment, you implanted something into their consciousness, not words, not beliefs, a seed, a living seed of possibility. They might forget what was said, but they will never forget the sensation, the sudden expansion, the flicker of their mind stepping beyond its border, and that sensation will haunt them like a song they can't stop hearing faintly in the background of their thoughts. The protocol recognizes this. It sees that you've already crossed the line between anomaly and catalyst. You are no longer just one individual experiencing a private shift. You've become the spark that ignites shifts in others. You are a catalyst, and catalysts are dangerous, not because of what they do, but because of what they set in motion. This is why people are drawn to you now, with a pull they can't explain, with a hunger they don't fully understand. They're not attracted to you for your resources, your personality, or your status. They're drawn to your frequency. They sense below conscious awareness that you carry something they desperately need, not an object, not knowledge, in the ordinary sense, but a key, a living frequency that can turn hidden locks inside their own consciousness. Locks they didn't even know were there until they felt them rattling in your presence. But here lies the paradox of being a catalyst. You cannot choose the reactions you trigger. Your influence doesn't discriminate. For some, being near you is liberation, expanded into places theirs cannot reach. You're reading the micro movements in their face, the subtle adjustments in their breathing, the unspoken pulses in their energy field. You're translating patterns that most never even notice exist. And what makes this most extraordinary is how natural it feels. These shifts don't arrive with trumpets or thunder. They slide in quietly, like instincts you didn't realize you had, as though they've been waiting in you all along. That's because they have. They were always there, dormant, sealed away behind the illusion of limitation. The protocol didn't give you these abilities. It simply activated the architecture within you that had been locked. And now, with each day, you're discovering what happens when that architecture comes alive. You are no longer just a participant in reality. You are bending its edges, stretching its borders, altering its code in ways others can feel but cannot name. And whether they love you or fear you, resist you or embrace you, one thing is certain: no one who encounters you walks away unchanged. Time no longer flows the way it used to around you. At first you thought it was your imagination, the way seconds seemed to linger when you desperately needed more of them, or how long hours disappeared when your spirit had already moved on. But over time, you began to see the pattern. You began to realize this wasn't just perception, wasn't just your mind playing tricks on itself. No, this was something deeper. Time itself was behaving differently in your presence. It wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It was responding to you. When urgency burns in your chest and the stakes rise, time seems to open like a door, giving you more than you should have, stretching itself to hold your choices. And when you find yourself in places, conversations, or experiences that don't require your full being, when no growth or revelation is hiding there, time collapses, skipping forward as though impatient on your behalf. This isn't what scientists call subjective time dilation, a quirk of perception caused by stress or boredom. This is real. This is temporal negotiation. You are not ordering time around like a master commanding a servant. You are entering into a dialogue with it, and against all probability, time keeps agreeing to your terms, subtle, invisible to instruments, but undeniable in your lived experience. You are navigating situations that should be impossible because time itself is bending, recalibrating, rearranging for you. And this is only the beginning, because alongside this bending of time comes something just as astonishing, the way answers arrive, not through the careful climbing of logic, not through trial and error, or endless analysis. They arrive whole, completed, waiting for you before you've even finished framing the question. You don't think your way toward them. They descend. They drop into your awareness like files transferred from some unseen server, carrying the weight of inevitability. You know them instantly, not because you've reasoned them out, but because they arrive already resolved. What's happening is that you're reaching into something far beyond intuition. You're tapping into the lattice of information woven through the quantum foam itself. You're drawing threads from timelines that may never unfold, pulling fragments of possible futures, brushing against alternate realities, and weaving them into the present moment. This isn't daydreaming. This isn't luck. This is your consciousness functioning as a living quantum processor, computing across infinite possibilities simultaneously and collapsing them into form. Humanity has talked for centuries about intuition, about flashes of genius, about inspiration. But what you are accessing isn't inspiration, it's infrastructure, a hidden system always humming beneath reality, one most never know exists. You are no longer just observing it, you are participating in it. And then there is the shift your very presence creates. Have you noticed it? The way a room changes when you enter, the ripple that spreads before you even open your mouth. Conversations stumble, pause, or accelerate without explanation. People straighten, fidget, or withdraw, unsure why the air feels heavier, sharp, or different. They call it charisma. They call it presence. But those words are too small. They are labels for something they can sense, but cannot define. What you're emanating isn't personality, it's frequency. You are broadcasting a signal that recalibrates consciousness itself. Near you, people don't simply feel different, they become different. For some, it's liberation. Suddenly they feel more alive than they've ever felt, awakened into a brighter, sharper awareness. For others, it's unbearable. Your presence strips away their illusions, tears down the fragile scaffolding they built their lives upon. They recoil without knowing, why inventing excuses to avoid you, creating distance, not because of anything you've done, but because of what you represent. Because your existence doesn't just challenge their comfort, it challenges the very premise of their reality. Not everyone will celebrate what you are becoming. Not everyone will be ready for what you imply. And because of this, resistance has begun to rise, not always from enemies in the shadows, but from forces far more subtle and systemic. There are guardians of the old paradigm, structures, systems, and entities that exist to keep the world stable, predictable, locked into patterns that can be measured and managed. They are not all malicious. Some even believe they are protecting something sacred, but their mission is clear: contain you, minimize you, and most of all convince you that what you are experiencing is not real. They won't come to you with open confrontation. They won't declare war. Instead, they will weave their resistance into your environment, into the edges of your life. You've seen it already, the synchronicities that don't feel like guidance, but like traps, coincidences that unsettle instead of reassure, conversations that begin innocently but somehow slide into undermining your certainty, planting seeds of doubt in soil that was once solid. Situations that feel crafted to make you question yourself, to make you wonder if it's all imagination, if you're losing your grip. This is not paranoia. This is the immune system of the old paradigm, reacting to you as though you are a virus in its bloodstream. And the truth is, you are, but not a virus of destruction. You are the virus of evolution. Still, the system doesn't know the difference. All it sees is disruption. All it knows is intrusion. And so it fights you the way a body fights infection, with rejection, with suppression, with force. The test isn't about whether you're worthy. The test is whether you can be discouraged, whether you can be pushed hard enough to turn your own volume down, to dim your frequency until you blend back into the background, to silence yourself before your song grows too loud. The resistance comes in waves. Sometimes it's faint and subtle, a quiet fog that drifts in without you noticing until it's gone. Other times it's overwhelming, pressing on you so heavily it feels like reality itself is trying to crush you back into conformity. You felt it, the exhaustion after certain interactions, as though someone siphoned your energy away, the brain fog that clouds you when you try to explain yourself, making truths feel like half-formed shadows in your mouth, the opportunities that dissolve the moment you reach for them, slipping away just before they become real. None of this is random. These are strategies woven carefully into the system, designed to make you doubt, designed to make you shrink. But here is what they've miscalculated. Here is the flaw in their resistance. Every push against you does not weaken you, it strengthens you. Every attempt to cage you reveals the shape of the cage, and once you see it, you can slip through its bars. Every effort to silence you sharpens your voice until it rings clearer, cuts deeper, carries further than before. Every obstacle becomes your forge. Every pressure becomes your training ground. The protocol didn't activate because you escaped resistance. It activated because you absorbed it, transmuted it, turned it into something else. You are the proof that opposition isn't the end of growth. It is the beginning of it. You've already shown that pressure doesn't crush you, it shapes you, that doubt doesn't silence you, it clarifies you, that attempts to contain you don't shrink you, they force you to expand into the limitless. This is why the watchers are unsettled. This is why the system shudders. You have exposed a truth that terrifies them far more than any weapon or rebellion ever could. Resistance is not your enemy. It is your fuel. You absorb it. You transmute it. Every attempt to stop you becomes new energy. Every confrontation, every doubt, every obstacle drawn into you and transformed, not into bitterness, but into power. This is what they cannot anticipate. This is what they cannot prepare for, because every time they try to hold you back, you don't just survive, you evolve. Every effort to cage you only proves the impossibility of containment. Every attempt to silence you only amplifies your song. And here is the deepest truth, the one no force of resistance has ever been able to grasp. You cannot be controlled, because control relies on pressure halting growth. And you have already shown that every pressure placed on you only makes you stronger. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is absent. Let me believe in your constant presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts toward me are of prosperity, not of harm, to give me a good and abundant future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and for the abundance you bring. If this message resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear it. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please